to be a good sommelier, you need to be approachable, you need to be compassionate, and you need to be a nice person. To be a successful sommelier, at the end of the day, all you have to do is offer people good drinks that they enjoy and souvenirs that they can take home and talk to their friends and families about. That's a successful sommelier. Winning awards is nice, and it's a great accolade for the hard work that's involved in maintaining and writing wine lists. But if you've not got customers that are going away happy, then you've not really done your job properly.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. One of the key features of the last year in the hospitality sector is seeing how venues adapt, evolve, and change shape to suit the situation, ensure viability, and also a point of difference. But this is not uncommon to hospitality. And over the years, we've seen many operators chance their arm on new ideas, even those that have been in the industry for decades. Jake Atkinson is a sommelier of Mojo's Kitchen, Bar and Bottleshop in Western Australia. Jake, how you going?
Good, thanks. Huck, yourself?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us. Mojo's has been around for a couple of decades, but one of the really interesting things is you don't see many restaurants and bars that are also a bottle shop. Tell us about the decision to add that to the business a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's a bit of a unique situation. Like most sort of restaurants, we were always operating under just a standard restaurant liquor license. So we didn't ever really have the ability to retail booze per se. So we did a bit of research and had a look at what we could actually do to expand that repertoire, because we've always had quite a strong focus on our liquor offerings, predominantly wine in the early days, and more so now we've added the craft beer side of things. But yeah, we did some research and discovered that a tavern license with an unrestricted tavern license would give us the ability to essentially add a retail component to our venue, which sort of was a model that I'd seen years ago that I fell in love with when I was a youngster doing my wine studies over in Melbourne, places like the City Wine Store and St Jude's Cellars and places like that, really kind of captivated my attention. So, yeah, it's something I sort of wanted to replicate with our own brand of hospitality.
It's a family-owned restaurant, and I'd love to take a deep dive into the history of that. But what sort of impact did adding that to the offering have?
So whilst it's something that we'd sort of been spitballing and trying to sort of get off the ground lightly for the last almost decade, and then end of 2017 we actually gave it a proper crack and invested the right amount of energy into making it a reality. So through everything that's happened in the whole COVID year that we've just been through, we kind of were a bit like a cat. We landed on our feet through having this little retail outlet. Essentially, it gave us the ability to have an extra revenue stream. Whilst we did do the whole takeaway food model, we had the ability to continue retailing liquor, which was considered an essential service. So whilst most places were having customers visit their venues through either a take-out window, almost drive-through scenario, we were still having limited guests actually come into our venue as well, which was, really quite different in terms of a hospitality venue.
The restaurant has been around for a couple of decades, and it's a family-owned restaurant, but you weren't always going to be part of the restaurant. You were studying something else. Tell us about what you'd planned to do and then what drew you back into the fold.
Yeah, for me it was a bit of an interesting story. As a young bloke, I was only ever really concerned about going skateboarding, fishing, hanging out with my mates, going to the pub. When I left school, I was not a bad student, but I was never the most, I guess, motivated with studies. So I had the opportunity to go on to university. I didn't ever actually take that, and sort of took a little bit of time to formulate myself and come up with a plan. And I did a TAFE course as a laboratory technician because I had a bit of an interest in science. And all the while I was working part-time at the family business in the kitchen and doing light front of house duties, which I didn't really enjoy at the time. And I took the first job that was sort of relating to those laboratory studies, which was actually a lab tech position at Willowbridge Estate in the Ferguson Valley. So I was essentially helping out the winemaker, aspirating sulphurs and doing chemical additions and a lot of sampling in the vineyards, which sort of really opened my eyes to the world of wine.
Take us back to that time. What sort of impact did it have on you?
Well, really, it lit the fire under me, and it opened my eyes to the world of wine. At that time, really, I'd seen a bit of wine in the family restaurant. I didn't drink wine. I barely drank beer. I was 18, 19 years old. I was still very young and very green. And for me, having that hands-on experience with the vinification of grape to wine, I really came to appreciate the process and the fact that it takes an entire set of seasons to produce a grape that will ultimately turn into wine. So I fell in love with the process and the notion of wine, and then in turn the curiosity was there to see, what wine actually tasted like. And I started to immerse myself in tasting and trying any wine, good, bad, or indifferent. So that was sort of the turning point for me that, wine wasn't just sort of grape vinegar in a bottle that old people drank. It was actually, it was telling the story of a season. So for me, I got that early kind of jump on what wine truly is as an agricultural item and not just a drink for old people.
Most people don't grow up wanting to be a sommelier, but you're one of WA's best. When was the moments that you realised that was a career for you?
Well, that was all circumstantial as well. I mean, I had this kind of wine epiphany at an early age, but becoming a sommelier wasn't really, what I wanted to do, or I didn't even know what it was. I couldn't pronounce the word at that time. So it was, again, through circumstance that I actually got drawn back into the family business. My stepfather, bless him, he's one of the hardest working people I know, and I think that's where I got my work ethic from. He's over the last 20 years worked 2 and 3 jobs as a media personality as well. He's the local statewide news anchor, and he also was doing some radio announcing. So in 2006, when the state elections came up, he's always had a real passion for politics. So he took some long service leave and stepped aside from his duties at the restaurant, which left a big void for restaurant management, and he ran as an independent candidate for our local seat. So I sort of, thought, well, I'm a big boy now. I'm 20, 21. I should be able to run the restaurant. So I jumped into the boots, and sort of the rest was history. I, had a bit of an interest in wine, and and alcohol in general by that stage after doing that early vintage at Willowbridge Estate. And then I think it was my mother that showed me an article in Gourmet Traveller. It was either Gourmet Traveller or Gourmet Traveller Wine about these people, the Court of Master Sommeliers, and she said, "Look, you can study wine." I thought, "Oh yeah, sounds pretty good." So fast forward a couple of years, I actually, enrolled myself, got the text, and spent a couple of years going through the Court of Master Sommeliers program, flying over to Melbourne, and doing the studies and tastings and going through that quite daunting process, really.
You mentioned that you jumped in at the age of 21 to run the restaurant. What were the challenges involved for you? Did you make any mistakes in those early days?
Of course I did, but, I was 21, so I didn't think so. And I was running my parents' restaurant, so, it was my way or no way. And sometimes it can be that way to a degree. But, look, a big part of, preparing for coming on this podcast, I sort of have been reflecting on my career, and it's been quite a journey of maturity. In the early days, I was bitten by the French wine bug early. After doing some stagiaire vintages with the Panel family down at Picardy Wines in Pemberton, and I was very fortunate to drink some very high-end Burgundy wines, and I fell in love with French through conversations and tastings with the Panel family of Burgundy wine. So, of course, any free time and spare money I had was spent browsing through Langton's wine auctions, trying to acquire Grand Cru Burgundies, first growth Bordeaux's, and essentially have no money for anything else. But I had a pretty good wine cellar. But, for me, looking back now, as much as I love those wines, they're special to me, and they're special at any opportunity you get to look at them. They're not what is a realistic kind of reality in everyday wine for me here at Mojo's in Bunbury, WA. Whilst they're special, they're not what actually, gets me excited, because they're just not an achievable everyday solution to, drinking wine or offering wine to my patrons. So, I mean, from the early days, my wine list was up to about 800-900 references. I think we consecutively got 3 glass wine ratings in the Gourmet Traveller Wine List of the Year magazine, which was amazing. And I have a massive appreciation, and I'm very grateful to the fact that my parents would pay the bills of my wine addiction, which sort of allowed us to achieve such an amazing collection of wine references. But, the market was very different back then. This was sort of 2009, 10, 11. There was that sort of bit of that, the wake of that mining boom. There was money to being spent. People were happy to spend 3 zeros on bottles of wine, and we were positioned in the right spot to be able to offer those that wanted it, those offerings. So, I mean, whilst it was a different time then, looking at it now, we just don't even consider offering wine in that sort of highbrow way anymore. So, yeah, I think it's been a maturity, but it's also been an evolution of the financial climate and the requirements of the people we serve in our restaurant.
The WA wine industry has evolved beautifully over this period of time that you've been at Mojo's as well. What do you love about it?
I mean, I guess I'm super grateful that I got in on my wine journey as a young fella, and I sort of kind of have paralleled the infancy of the Geograph wine growing region, our local wine area, with my own journey. I sort of saw a lot of vineyards being, either early established and in their infancy, and the quality of wines being sort of somewhat mediocre. Fast forward 15 odd years to now, where there's a decent amount of vine age. Brands have developed beautifully, and the quality of wines have been fantastic. And I've seen that across the board with a few different growing regions having, getting the better part of 20 years of sort of local vintage knowledge under my belt. It's been a real journey seeing the way that the caterpillar has evolved into the butterfly.
We've spoken to a few sommeliers on Deep in the Weeds, but it's always been about wine. But you've got a real passion for craft beer as well, and the craft beer scene in Australia has developed incredibly over the last decade. What makes a great craft beer?
Well, drinkability first and foremost. I mean, to be a good sommelier, you need to be versed in all attributes of the beverage world, I believe. Whilst, I mean, things like sake and cigar service that were part of our Court of Master Sommelier trainings aren't something that I really delve into. Things like beer have become a really major part of the repertoire of our offerings at the restaurant. Whilst I'm a wine lover, first and foremost, and have the utmost respect for wine, I'm a beer drinker too. So it's not hard to have an interest in something that you're invested in, like beer. So I mean, I probably drink more beer in a weekly basis than wine, but I have a different kind of level of respect for beer and wine. I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday saying that whilst brewers can put out all of these incredible different beers in such a short amount of time, the poor old winemakers will spend 2 decades and only put out 20 different vintages of the same vine, whereas a brewer could essentially put out 2,000 different beers in that period of time if they really, so felt like it. So, yes, beers are just so dynamic and so ever-changing. It's almost, I liken the craft beer trend to the COVID landscape. It's a constantly evolving beast. It's moving and it's dynamic, and you just don't know what to expect, and you don't know how it's going to change from one week to another.
Tell us a bit about Mojo's, how it all started, what it was like back then, when, particularly when you were running the restaurant, and how it's evolved.
Yeah, Mojo's has seen a lot of different changes from when my folks first started the business in 2001, while I was sort of in the last years of high school to now. They bought the business whilst owning a small coffee roastery shop down the road, and the reason they purchased and set up Mojo's was because the little coffee shop was a really successful, fantastic business that had small overheads and small staffing costs. They wanted to go a little bit bigger, better, more fancy, have a commercial kitchen, and offer have some food offerings. So they set up Mojo's essentially as a high-end cafe. We're a part of a cinema complex, so we're right in the centre of town, right adjacent to a movie theatre, and the business model was sort of set up around facilitating the cinema goers. So in the early days, I think for the first 2-3 years, we didn't actually even have a liquor licence at the premise. So it was just set up as a bit of a modern cafe, polished concrete floors, no artwork, clean edges, clean lines. And sort of as the years went by, we kind of continually evolved, changed, redecorated, updated our kitchen. I think 5 years into the life of the business, we actually took over the tenancy next door to us and added a function space, which allowed us to increase the size of our kitchen and cool rooms, and sort of had quite a big overhaul. And then when I got my hands on the wine list and really sort of expanded the alcohol offerings, we became a lot more of a serious restaurant and we really invested a lot more interest and time into finding the right chefs and offering the more highbrow seasonal kind of food offerings, and sort of went from, plain tables to white tablecloths, setting full glasses, full sets of cutlery, to almost a slightly, improvised version of fine dining, essentially. All the way to full circle now, where we're back to raw tables with minimal settings, and now we have a very much a casual hospitality offering. We're still trying to achieve the same level of good service we've always had, but in a more casual setting, with the Bottleshop as a big feature in our everyday life.
You've won awards such as Best Australian Restaurant Beer List, Best Regional Listing of Wines. Tell us what it takes to put together these sort of menus and your consideration.
Probably first and foremost, understanding parents that have full faith in the fact that I'm not just pissing their money away per se, but no, they've been really supportive and have always hampered my addiction to finding the next best, most exciting, most interesting offerings, whether it's beer, wine, spirits alike. It's always moving, but for me, I think curiosity has been the biggest part of that, and wanting to explore. I guess working in the wineries at an early age was amazing and formative for sort of getting that interest. But if I had to sort of stay in that environment, I think I would have become bored very quickly. So it's always that curiosity that's led me to, want to write a compelling list, looking for themes, looking for different examples of grape varietals, beer styles.
You've worked really hard and been very active trying to connect local producers to your clientele through what you do. Tell us about your in-house program that concentrates on that.
Yeah, so when we set up the Bottleshop, a big part of what I wanted to do was put the Geograph wine growing region into the limelight. So when we had actually been approved our licence, I spent a bit of time writing and emailing out to all of the local wine producers in the Geograph region, a little bit about, what we intended to do and how we were wanting to, be a partner to the actual whole region, not just individual producers. So essentially, what my thoughts were, or what my concept was we wanted to be a bit of a cellar door in the city for the Geograph wine growers. Where Bunbury is, it's pretty well smack bang in the centre of the upper and lower Geograph wine growing regions. You've got Harvey pretty well to the northern extreme, all the way down to Capel, Bustleton Jetty, and those surrounds in the southern extreme. Bunbury's more or less equal distance from north to south in the middle. So there was no one really offering a comprehensive selection of Geograph wines. And there's a lot of producers that, through their location or their setup, don't actually have a platform to showcase their wines, whether they have a cellar door or not. We wanted to, pull all those wines or examples of those wines into one central location. So we set up the Bottleshop with a massive showcase on Geograph. And that's still a big part of what we're doing now. It's probably our main feature in the wine section is our geograph growers. Every second week we would have a local producer come in and use our space as a pop-up cellar door where they could showcase whichever their wines they wanted, and we would then on-sell them either for in-house consumption or takeaway at their cellar door prices, just to sort of, offer a little bit of a platform for all of our wonderful local growers to, showcase to potentially and hopefully new customers.
Mojo's changed a lot over the years, and so has your wine offering. Have the events of the last year changed the focus and what you'll be doing moving forward?
Absolutely. COVID sort of taught us all some valuable lessons. I mean, some of the best outcomes I've seen of the whole last 12 months has been the fact that customers seem to have a lot more respect for the hospitality industry. There's a little bit more compassion there. And also, I think the biggest part of what I've sort of been surprised by is the fact that, people are acknowledging where their money's being spent and what that knock-on effect is. So, I mean, us, like a lot of the hospitality industry in WA, have had issues finding skilled staff and staff in general. So we've had to pare back certain bits and pieces, and we've also, done a lot of reflecting and, working out what's really actually important in operating a daily restaurant. And, we definitely have simplified our offerings. And I think for the better, cutting out some of those loose ends that are not super necessary, whilst, they might be some of the pretty fancy, nice things. They're just really, always underappreciated. So streamlining certain procedures and things hasn't actually been a bad thing, and, helps us to, focus more on what the key fundamentals of our business are.
You mentioned that a key feature of your career has been maturing along as you go and working things out and understanding things better and making better decisions. What sort of advice do you have for those in the industry that want to go down your path and become a sommelier?
Look, I don't think I've ever met a sommelier that started out their career intending to become a sommelier. It's sort of one of those things that finds the individual. Maybe it's because I'm in Western Australia and it's not really, a massive profession. Say you're in Paris, London, New York. Yeah, I could definitely see career SOMs being something that, maybe younger people aspire to. But, the fact that you're not allowed to legally drink alcohol until you've well and truly left school means that, your teachers and your peers aren't going to encourage you to become, a professional in a liquor industry. So it's something that I think happens a little later on generally. But look, I mean, I've been fortunate to actually work with, for a big part of my career, a French guy that was running 3 Michelin star wine list and is very talented sommelier with a great palate. So he was acted as a great mentor for me at a young age, but also I've had some other people like the Panel family from Picardy really sort of hamper my wine interest, and my parents, so that I could, grow a little bit. Advice-wise for anyone young wanting to get into it, absolutely just go for it. Find yourself the best wine-related or booze-related setting you can get a job in. Do whatever you can and keep an open mind and be a sponge for knowledge. I mean, really, the best sommeliers are the ones that have always got an open mind and open ears. They're the ones that are going to continually evolve, learn, and be able to translate the stories of the vines and the bottles to their customers. And, you know, a successful sommelier is someone that should be compassionate and be able to be approachable. And I guess from what I learned and from the way I sort of started to where I am now, you know, we did the whole suit and tie thing back in the day with our white tablecloths, and, you know, I thought I was red hot and, you know, the best thing since sliced bread. But the reality is fact. I'm sure there was 100,000 other sommeliers out there with probably better palate and better wine knowledge than I had. But what I sort of did as an evolution and my growth, I grounded myself and got grounded and got schooled and learnt that, you know, to be a good sommelier, you need to be approachable, you need to be compassionate, and you need to be a nice person. You know, to be a successful sommelier, at the end of the day, all you have to do is offer people good drinks that they enjoy and souvenirs that they can take home and talk to their friends and families about. That's a successful sommelier. Winning awards is nice, and it's great accolade for the hard work that's involved in maintaining and writing wine lists. But if you've not got customers that are going away happy, then you've not really done your job properly.
Well, that's amazing advice, and it's amazing to have you on Deep in the Weeds, Jake. Please keep in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Huck.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.